The first time that drone stopped outside my bedroom window, I was standing there in my underwear with a coffee cup in one hand and 30 years of buried anger in the other. And I remember thinking, whoever's flying that thing has no idea how badly they just misjudged me. It hovered 6 feet from the glass, steady as a hawk, its camera tilting down to study my face, then my hands, then the hallway behind me, and when I stepped closer it backed away slowly, almost like it was testing how far I would follow. By nightfall, I would catch 3 men dragging a barrel of industrial chemicals through my woods. But that morning I still believed I was dealing with nosy neighbors and a rich woman who had never heard the word no. My name is Warren Hale, and I bought 87 acres outside a little Texas town called Cedar Run because I had spent most of my adult life surrounded by noise. Sirens, radios, courthouse doors, crying families, angry husbands, frightened kids. The whole ugly soundtrack that comes with wearing a badge for 32 years. I had been a county sheriff, then an investigator for the state, and by the time I retired my left knee was held together by screws, my hearing was half gone, and I could tell when somebody was lying before they finished their first sentence. What I could not do anymore was sleep. I would close my eyes and see headlights in rain, blood on kitchen tile, mothers gripping my coat while I tried to find words that did not exist. So I sold my place near Austin, emptied my savings, and bought a neglected tract of timber along dry Cypress Creek. The farmhouse sagged in the middle, the barn roof had more holes than sheet metal, and the pond looked like something a dinosaur might crawl out of. But the land was quiet, real quiet, the kind of nature you stop whatever you're doing. I spent almost 2 years fixing it one stubborn piece at a time. New fencing, new roof, cleared trails, repaired well, a little dock on the pond. And by the second spring I could sit on the porch after sunset and hear coyotes calling from the ridge. I thought I had finally outrun the past. Then Pine Haven Reserve appeared on the eastern boundary. First came the bulldozers, then the concrete trucks, then a stone entrance tall enough to impress a Roman emperor. Within months, rows of expensive houses covered the hillside, every roof the same color, every mailbox the same height, every lawn clipped so short it looked nervous. I did not care. Their land was theirs, mine was mine, and the deeds of my property predated their development by more than 60 years. I was zoned agricultural, outside their association, and free to keep my rusted tractor exactly where I pleased. Apparently, that offended someone. The first visit came from 2 men in a black utility cart with yellow lights flashing on top. They wore tan shirts with Pine Haven Community Protection stitched across the chest, which was a fancy way of saying 2 grown men had been given radios and immediately lost their minds. I was repairing a section of fence when they rolled slowly along my property line, taking pictures of my equipment shed and pointing toward the old smokehouse. When I waved, they both looked startled. The driver nearly dropped his clipboard, and they sped off without a word. 3 days later, I found one of them inside my barn. He was filming my diesel tank with a body camera strapped to his vest. Standing there like he owned the place, I leaned against the doorway and said, "You lose something, son?" He spun around so fast he almost tripped over a feed bucket. "Sir, this structure may present a hazardous condition to adjacent residential property." I looked past him toward the nearest Pine Haven house, which was nearly half a mile away. "Adjacent, huh?" He swallowed and tried to straighten his shoulders. "We have authority to inspect environmental buffer zones." "No," I said. "You have a best from the internet and poor judgment." He started quoting some regulation, but I took one slow step forward and let the silence do the work. Men like him expect shouting because shouting gives them something to push against. Silence makes them hear their own fear. I told him he had 15 seconds to leave before I called actual law enforcement, and he was back in that cart before I reached 10. That afternoon, I called Nolan Briggs, the new sheriff, and my former chief deputy. Nolan had a voice like gravel and the patience of a man trying to quit chewing tobacco. He listened, sighed, then said, "You have met Celeste Merrick." I had not, but I already disliked the sound of her name. Nolan explained that Celeste was president of the Pine Haven Board, wife of a commercial developer, and the unofficial queen of every square foot she could see from her balcony. She had been calling his office twice a week, complaining about livestock smells, farm machinery, loose branches, and what she called visual contamination from my property. No one told her I was not under her authority. She told him everybody could be persuaded. "Watch yourself, Warren," he said. "She does not like losing." and she has enough money to make bad ideas look official. A few days later, the drone started. Not toys either. These were professional machines with stabilized cameras and long-range lenses. They flew over the pasture at dawn, hovered near my workshop, followed my truck when I checked the north gate. One scared my horses badly enough that my mare, June, tore her shoulder on a fence post. I documented every flight, every time, every direction, but I still told myself not to overreact. Old lawmen have a dangerous habit of seeing conspiracies where there are only idiots. Then one rainy afternoon, a drone clipped a pecan limb and dropped into the pond. I waded in, pulled it from the mud, and carried it to the workshop. The memory card was still readable. What I found was not curiosity. It was a study of my life. There were videos of my doors, my windows, my truck leaving for town, my evening rounds, even footage through the kitchen glass while I stood at the sink. Then I found a file marked Pine Haven Expansion West. The map showed 30 luxury homes laid directly across my property. My house had been replaced by a clubhouse. My pond was labeled Decorative Water Feature. Along the edge of the document was a list of strategies: pressure through nuisance complaints, environmental review, tax complications, for sale. The final line was highlighted in red: contamination incident if necessary. I sat there, in the dark, rain ticking on the roof, reading those words again and again. Contamination incident. That was the moment I understood they were not trying to annoy me into cutting my grass. They were preparing to destroy my land, ruin me financially, and buy what was left for pennies. And somewhere beyond the tree line, somebody believed the old man with the limp would never see it coming. I did not call Nolan right away, because a map was evidence of intent, not proof of a crime. And people with money are very good at turning intent into a misunderstanding once lawyers get involved. I copied every file from the card, backed it up twice, then put the drone in a metal cabinet and locked the shop. That night I sat on the porch with the lights off, listening to the creek move through the dark, trying to decide how much of the man I used to be I was willing to bring back. Retirement had softened some things in me, but not the part that recognized the hunt. Celeste Merrick had studied my routines, my gates, my buildings, even the hours when I drove into town. And now that I had her drone, she would know the plan was exposed. Greed makes careful people reckless, and I figured she would either retreat or move faster. Just before midnight, my phone buzzed with a number I did not recognize. A young man whispered, "Mr. Hale, my name is Cody Bell. I work nights for Pine Haven Security, and I need you to listen before I lose my nerve." I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. "Go ahead." He took a shaky breath. "Mrs. Allen, Merrick knows you found the drone. Travis told her it went down near your pond." Travis was the fellow I had caught in my barn. The one who wore a tactical vest like Halloween had become a career choice. "What is she planning, Cody?" There was a pause. Then he said, "They are coming tonight. 3 men, maybe 4. They have a 55-gallon drum from an auto parts plant outside San Marcos. Use solvent, oil, degreaser, stuff they are not supposed to dump anywhere. She wants it buried near the feeder stream behind your west ridge. Then she is calling the state environmental office in the morning and saying she smelled chemicals coming from your land." I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. It was not fear exactly. Fear is fast and noisy. This was slower, the kind of anger that sharpens everything. "What time?" "Around 2. They think you take sleeping pills." "Cody, why are you telling me this?" "Because she has done this kind of thing before. Not this bad, but close. She ran an elderly couple out of a property near the south gate with bogus drainage complaints. Their house became the guest lodge. I saw the files. I cannot be part of this anymore." I told him to go home, shut off his phone, and stare out the window. Pine Haven until morning. Then I called Nolan from the landline. He answered on the 4th ring, sounding half asleep and fully annoyed. This better involve either a murder or free breakfast. I told him everything. By the time I finished, he was wide awake. "I can have deputies there in 20 minutes. He said. "No," I told him. "If cruisers roll up now, they will disappear. Deny the whole thing. And Celeste will have some attorney explain that the barrel was for a community cleanup project. I need them on my land with the drum open and shovels in the dirt." Nolan went quiet. "You are planning something stupid." "Controlled," I said. "That is just the old man version of stupid." I asked him to stage 2 units on County Road 9. "Lights off." and wait for my call. He argued for another minute, then gave in because he knew I was right and hated that fact. I went to the gun safe and took out my old pump shotgun. I loaded it with non-lethal shells first and kept regular buckshot in a side pouch, not because I wanted a gunfight, but because men willing to poison a water supply are not necessarily men who stop at trespassing. Then I grabbed 3 trail cameras, an audio recorder, a flashlight, and the old green field jacket I had worn during winter searches years ago. The feeder stream cut through a low hollow about 400 yards from the house. I positioned one camera toward the narrow trail from Pine Haven, another facing the stream bank, and the third high in a cedar where it could see the whole clearing. Then I settled behind a fallen oak and waited. Waiting used to be the hardest part of police work. But age changes your relationship with time. Young men fight silence. Old men listen to it. Around 1:45, the insects stopped. 5 minutes later, I saw red flashlight beams weaving between the trees. 3 men came down the trail, 2 wrestling a black plastic drum on a handcart while Travis carried shovels over his shoulder. They were dressed in dark pants and matching vests with no agency name, which told me they wanted to look official without creating paperwork. They stopped 15 yards from the stream. "This is the spot," Travis whispered. "Mrs. Merrick said close enough that it reaches the water after rain, but not so close it looks staged." One of the other men asked, "What if the old guy hears us?" Travis laughed softly. "He can barely walk. By the time he gets down here, we will be gone." I almost smiled. There is something deeply satisfying about hearing an enemy build his confidence on bad information. They rolled a drum beside the bank and started digging. The lid was loose, and the chemical smell reached me even to damp soil and cedar. One man hesitated. "This is federal trouble, Travis. If that stuff gets into the creek, it goes through 3 ranches and into the county reservoir." Travis drove his shovel into the ground and said, "We are not paid to think. We dump it. Merritt makes the call. The state locks Hale down, and the developer buys the property before cleanup costs bury him." That sentence was worth more than any photograph. The recorder had motive, payment, method, and target. I waited until the trench was deep enough and the barrel was tilted toward it. Then I stood. I pumped the shotgun once, slow and loud. Every man in that clearing froze. Travis turned first, his flashlight cutting across the trees until it found me. "Keep that beam out of my eyes," I said. He lowered it immediately. "Mr. D. Hale," he began, "this is not what it looks like. It looks like 3 men committing felony trespass while preparing to dump hazardous chemicals into a protected waterway. If you have a better description, I am listening." Nobody spoke. I stepped into the clearing, keeping the muzzle low but ready. Travis lifted my knee brace and tried to recover some courage. "You cannot hold us at gunpoint." I nodded toward the trees. "I am not holding you. I am giving you a choice. You can stay and explain yourselves to the sheriff, or you can run and explain why your faces are on 3 cameras and your voices are on a recorder." The man nearest the barrel went pale. "Cameras. 3 of them," I said. "Good angles, too." Travis glanced toward the trail. I could see him calculating distance, darkness, and how much loyalty he felt toward Celeste Merrick. Not much, apparently. I told him to leave the drum, the cart, the shovels, and their gloves. Then I said they had 10 seconds to get off my land before I released the dogs. Behind me, my hound Roscoe growled from the brush. Roscoe was old, overweight, and afraid of thunder, but in the dark he sounded like something that ate trespassers for sport. Travis ran first. The other 2 followed so fast one lost a boot in the mud. They crashed through the trees, cursed each other, and vanished toward Pine Haven. I waited until their lights disappeared, then called Nolan. Deputies arrived 6 minutes later with no sirens, followed by Nolan in his personal truck. He looked at the barrel, the trench, and the camera footage, then stared at me. "You let them run." "I wanted the people who hired them," I said. He rubbed both hands over his face. "One day, Warren, you are going to retire from retirement." We sealed the barrel, photographed the scene, bagged the tools, and documented the tire tracks leading back toward Pine Haven. Before sunrise, Nolan had warrants in motion and the State Environmental Division on its way. At 7:30, a gray sedan pulled into my drive carrying 2 investigators and a field technician. I handed them the clean soil and water reports I had ordered after finding the expansion map, then showed them the video of Travis and the others discussing the plan. The lead investigator, a woman named Dana Ruiz, watched the footage twice without saying a word. When it ended, she looked at Nolan and said, "This is not illegal dumping. This is attempted environmental sabotage tied to a property acquisition scheme." That phrase changed the room. Nolan's phone rang while Dana's team collected samples. He listened for less than a minute, then looked at me with the kind of smile he usually saved for solved cases and terrible jokes. "Cody Bell just walked into the sheriff's office with a laptop," he said. "He has board emails, security invoices, drone flight logs, and payment records from Celeste to Travis. He also has a recording of Celeste telling them exactly where to bury the barrel." I looked toward the ridge where the roofs of Pine Haven caught the morning sun. For months, Celeste had watched me from above, measured my habits, counted my weaknesses, and planned the day she would take everything I owned. Now the cameras were pointed the other way. Nolan closed his phone and asked, "You want to come with me when we arrest her?" I reached for my coat. I would not miss it for the world. We drove into Pine Haven just after 9. Nolan in his cruiser, Dana Ruiz behind him in the state sedan, and me bringing up the rear in my old Ford, which looked about as welcome among those polished stone mailboxes as a muddy boot at a wedding. The neighborhood was already awake. Sprinklers ticking across perfect lawns, delivery vans easing through the gate, residents walking little dogs that probably had better health insurance than I did. Celeste Merrick stood outside the clubhouse in cream-colored slacks and a navy blazer, directing a landscaping crew with one hand while holding a silver coffee cup in the other. She was pointing at a row of red flowers as though they had personally insulted her. When she saw Nolan's cruiser, she smiled. Not a nervous smile either, a satisfied one. She handed her cup to an assistant and walked toward us with the confidence of a woman who believed the law was simply another service she paid for. "Sheriff Briggs," she called. "I assume this is about the hazardous materials on Mr. Hale's property. I am glad you finally took my report seriously." Nolan stepped out and shut the door behind him. Celeste kept talking. "I told your office for months that his land was a threat to this community. Frankly, if he had cooperated from the beginning, none of this would have been necessary." That sentence hung in the air. Dana looked at me, then at Nolan. Nolan removed his sunglasses and said, "You are right about one thing, Mrs. Merrick. None of this was necessary." Her smile slipped just a little. He walked toward her, pulled out his handcuffs, and told her to place her hands behind her back. For the first time since I had heard her name, Celeste Merrick had nothing to say. Then all the words came at once. "What are you doing? Do you know who I am? My attorney sits on the county development board. My husband knows the governor." Nolan turned her gently but firmly and locked one cuff around her wrist. "Celeste Merrick, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit environmental sabotage, criminal trespass, attempted contamination of a public waterway, unlawful surveillance, and organized fraud." Her face changed so fast it was almost hard to watch. The polished certainty drained out of it, leaving behind something smaller and meaner. She twisted around and spotted me beside my truck. "This is your fault," she snapped. "You could have sold peacefully." I laughed, though there was not much humor in it. "Peacefully? You sent drones to my bedroom and hired men to poison my creek." Her eyes narrowed. "You were sitting on land that was worth more to the community than it was to you." There it was, the whole rotten heart of it. Not a misunderstanding, not a zoning dispute, not concern for public safety. She truly believed value belonged to whoever could make the most money from it. Dana stepped forward and held up a sealed evidence bag containing a copy of the payment records. "We also have your invoices, your messages, your flight logs, and a recording of you giving instructions about the barrel." Celeste looked toward the clubhouse as residents began gathering near the entrance. Curtains moved in nearby windows. Garage doors opened. People came outside slowly, not because they were shocked to see police, but because they had been waiting years to see someone put limits on her. A gray-haired man in a golf shirt called out, "Is this about the special assessments?" A woman holding a terrier asked, "What about the foreclosure letters?" Nolan looked at Dana, and Dana looked back at him. The case was already getting larger. Celeste had not just targeted me. Cody's files showed that she had used the association as a private weapon for years. Residents who questioned her budgets received violation notices. Families who fell behind on dues were buried under legal fees, then pressured to sell to companies connected to her husband. Contractors paid inflated invoices and returned part of the money through consulting accounts. Even the security patrol had been financed through an emergency assessment that nobody had voted on. Travis and the other two men were arrested before noon. Travis tried to claim they believed the barrel contained harmless construction waste, but the audio recording destroyed that story. The other two turned on him almost immediately. Then all three turned on Celeste. Greed may build a conspiracy, but fear takes it apart piece by piece. Cody entered protective custody long enough to testify before a grand jury. I met him once afterward at a diner outside Cedar Run. He was younger than I had imagined, maybe 24, with nervous hands and the exhausted eyes of someone who had spent too long obeying bad people. He apologized for driving the patrol cart along my fence. I told him he had done wrong, then done something right when it mattered most. Those two things do not cancel each other out, but sometimes they are enough to show which direction a man is trying to walk. Dana's investigation pulled in the state attorney general, the county prosecutor, and eventually a federal environmental unit because the creek fed into a protected reservoir. Pine Haven's developer claimed Celeste had acted alone, which was convenient considering its executives had discussed my property in half a dozen emails. They denied authorizing sabotage, but they had approved legal funds, surveillance expenses, and a proposed acquisition budget before I had ever agreed to sell. My lawyer called their position complicated. I called it lying with neckties. We settled 10 months later. I cannot give the exact number, but it was enough to repair every fence on my land, replace the barn, establish a conservation easement, and make sure no developer could carve Dry Cypress Creek into luxury lots after I was gone. Celeste received 11 years after pleading guilty to several charges to avoid a longer sentence. Travis got 4. The other men received shorter terms for cooperating. Cody received probation for his earlier involvement in hundreds of hours of community service. Pine Haven's board collapsed. The residents voted out every member who had supported Celeste, and the private patrol was dissolved. Some people wanted to eliminate the HOA entirely. Others argue that the problem was not the rules, but the people who abused them. That debate nearly tore the neighborhood apart a second time. 6 months after the sentencing, I built a steel gate at the end of my drive. Nothing fancy, just heavy posts, reinforced hinges, and a simple sign that read Dry Cypress Ranch, private land, quiet maintained by law. One spring morning, I stood on the porch with coffee while mist lifted from the pond. June grazed near the repaired fence. Roscoe slept under the steps, and somewhere in the woods, a woodpecker hammered at an oak. No drones, no golf carts, no clipboard patrols, just water moving over stone. I had spent most of my life believing peace was what remained when trouble finally left. I know better now. Peace is something you defend, carefully, legally, and sometimes loudly enough that people who mistake kindness for weakness finally understand the difference. So tell me this, was I right to let those men begin digging before I called the deputies? Or did I take a risk no property was worth? And when an HOA claims is protecting a community while destroying the rights of one person, where should the line be drawn? Share your answer in the comments, because justice looks simple from a distance, but up close, it usually has mud on its boots.